Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
PMQ's underway. Theo Usherwood in the blocks, preparing to bring you up to speed with what has unfolded there at about 12:45. Before that, I think this is the very first time. Do you know, just to give you an insight into how crazy this job is, do you know what our two choices were for this final hour? Our two choices were that viral thing that involves it's quite hard to explain really without being a little bit indelicate during your lunch hour, but it involves a first date and some human waste. Have you seen it? And so that was the toss-up. It would have been, have you been on a worse date than this? Or did you get together as a result of a more disastrous sort of confluence of circumstances than these two? If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's on the LBC website. I'll try and tweet it. I'll also tweet a link to that book we were just discussing. It really is special. If you recognised as a parent what I just described, those little boys, young lads on the bus, visibly buckling or reacting to the strain of macho expectations, you could do a lot worse than, if not get them to read this book, then read it yourself and find yourself equipped with some of the weapons you need to fight against the toxic potential, the toxic wing, if you like, of machismo and masculinity. Where was I? So that was our choice. We were either going to talk about the date and, all right, a poo, sorry, or we were going to talk about Jacob Rees Mogg's comments about two of the most potentially controversial, historically controversial elements of social policy on the planet. And I could be wrong, and there'll be somebody listening to this who pays more attention to the programme than I do. I mean somebody normal, not Bingo Boy sitting there with this little... People think I make this up. I did an interview at the Huffington Post the other day who wanted to talk about trolls, and I said there's one guy who's made a bingo sheet with about 50 phrases on it that I use on a regular basis, and he sits there every single day ticking them off. And it sounds like a super fan. I said, no, it's a super... what's the opposite of a fan? Anti-fan. And they didn't believe it, because I flipping blocked him. I couldn't find the evidence, find the proof of it to show the journalist. But anyway, I digress slightly. The point is this: there'll be someone listening who'll say, no, actually, James, I think you'll find that you tackled this subject in July of 2011. I don't think we've done abortion as a topic on this programme before. I really don't, because I did it so often at school. It was the hardy perennial of the Ampleforth Debating Society, a Catholic monastic school. And as an adopted kid, I was the poster boy for being anti-abortion. I remember doing a debate at King's Wimbledon. It was such a big deal. We travelled half the country from North Yorkshire to Wimbledon to do a debate about abortion, and the other side, it was a bit like Michael Gove, actually, looking back, a very bookish, a very owlish young fellow who was their star debater, and I was my school's star debater, and he went first, and he was saying women should have the right to choose, and he stood up and said, the other side will tell you horror stories involving backstreet and coat hangers and all these horrible stories that actually, as a Catholic schoolboy, I had been taught. We did get that very, very inflammatory rhetoric, and he was very unlucky, because I could then stand up and say, actually, I'm not going to go down that road. I'm just going to say to you that if abortion had been legal in Ireland in 1972, I would never have been born. And that is why I don't think women should be able to terminate their pregnancies. And that was me at the age of about 14 or 15. I know that I couldn't have been 16, because when I was 16, I thought that I had got somebody pregnant. And in the blink of an eye, my attitude to abortion changed. It didn't necessarily change as much as it has since, but the idea that I had the right to tell her what she should do seemed to me to be about as profoundly offensive as it's possible to imagine. And that, for me, is the starting point of any debate about abortion, termination, right to choose, pro-choice, whatever you want to call it. How on earth can a man possess the arrogance, whether it's born of religious beliefs, which frankly I don't buy at all. It's born of a kind of misogynistic exceptionalism. It's coercive contraception. The only way that the existence of the contraceptive pill, the arrival of the contraceptive pill in the 1960s, was the first time that women could actually take control of their own sexuality. Up until that, it was enslaved to men, because if he got you pregnant, whether you wanted to have sex with him or not, if he got you pregnant and you couldn't terminate the pregnancy, your life, as you knew it, as you were expecting it to unfold, was over. Unless, of course, you could do what my biological mother did at the age of, well, barely 16 and give away the baby because of the religious oppression in your home country that forces you as a child, really, to cross seas, cross oceans in pursuit of a place where you could actually live out your pregnancy in peace without being derided and abused by the local priest, and at the end of it give the greatest gift imaginable to a couple who weren't able to have children of their own. Now, I'm getting emotional and I'm getting personal on this because it seems to me to be a subject that is almost impossible to discuss in the crucible of objectivity. I'd like to try, and we are talking about it this hour, because a increasingly prominent and popular politician, Jacob Rees Mogg, has this morning given an interview in which he expressed his belief that abortion is always wrong, regardless of the circumstances in which the woman became pregnant. So if his daughters were raped, he would tell them that he believes they shouldn't terminate their pregnancy. As things stand, whether or not, God forbid, anything that gross should ever happen to anybody, opinions might change, but I find that almost impossible to believe, almost impossible to understand. The only thing I can think of that's comparable to it is someone that used to work here saying that if their daughter got raped while she was really, really drunk, she didn't think it would necessarily be rape, and it wouldn't go to the police. And you look at those grooming stories from the north of England and what men can do to women when they've got them absolutely doolally with drugs and alcohol, and then to say somehow that it's not proper rape when they're too pie-eyed or too high to know what's going on. It makes me sick, actually, physically. And now I'm not given, as you know if you listen to the programme on a regular basis, I'm not given to this sort of hyperbole, but it does actually make my tummy flip over. The idea that if a woman is really, really drunk, or she's taken lots of drugs, then somehow her right to say no has been compromised. And it's amazing how many people get very, very exercised about those grooming gangs, but somehow also argue that you can't, if you're talking about a footballer, for example, grooming an underage girl, it somehow becomes a very different sort of crime. It's almost as if the colour of the perpetrator is more important than the plight of the victim. But I'm sure nobody's that racist. To take it back to consent, which is the conversation that we're having, and to Jacob Rees Mogg, the bots that we discussed with Mike Hind last week, I know a lot of you found that interview as fascinating as I did. The bots that moved from Brexit to Trump and stay silent the rest of the time, and now moving to Jacob Rees Mogg. Make of that what you will, but these curious internet accounts that are essentially astroturfing, trying to create a false reality, trying to create an environment in which people like me lose the confidence to speak out because the number of people that pile on you, or the number of apparent people that pile on you on social media, is so huge, and the work that's been done in identifying how similar they are, how they're set up, how they're often run remotely, or sometimes it'll be a person who's actually being paid to kind of cheerlead this nastiness. Those bots weirdly have moved from Brexit to Trump to Jacob Rees Mogg, who has replaced Boris Johnson as the nation's favourite P.G. Woodhouse character, which would be fine if, you know, the leader of the Conservative Party wasn't also the Prime Minister. So he has said that he thinks abortion is always wrong. I say no man has the right to say that. And that's the angle I'd like to take. So I'm not really interested, in the first instance, in what you think about abortion. I'm interested only in whether or not you think men have any right whatsoever to opine on this subject. And by opine, I obviously don't mean, well, it has to be up to a woman what happens. You're allowed to say that as a man. You're not allowed to say, because we talk, there we go. Yesterday, conversation about Christianity and that simple question of at what point does a force for good become bad? And I think that point is probably where you cite your religion as the grounds for telling somebody that they can't do something that they want to do, or they have to do something that they don't want to do. You know, in this country, it was not illegal. It was a legal impossibility to rape your wife in living memory. The law protected men. Marriage was viewed as such, that you couldn't rape your own wife. In fact, the Bible, if you read the right bits of Leviticus, the Bible probably offers what's pretty close to a justification of that scenario, which is why when people describe their Catholicism as the grounds for their opposition to abortion, I get really worried, because if you're really going to cite the Bible or an interpretation of the Bible as the grounds for your contemporary morality, then you can make a case for slavery. You can make a case for almost anything. What do you think about what Jacob Rees Mogg has said? Should men be allowed? Can't be allowed. You've got to be able to have an opinion. Get this question right. Yeah. What makes some men think that they are entitled to tell women what they can do when they get pregnant? 034, what they have to do, what they should do. And remember, if you are religious, the subtext of this, if you believe in heaven and hell, is that if you exercise your right to choose, you will go to hell. Phone lines are wide open, which is hardly surprising given the complexity and the difficulty of this subject. Weirdly, and possibly uniquely for a radio phone-in host, I don't think I've ever discussed abortion before. But the reason we're discussing it today is not necessarily to examine the rights and wrongs of it, but simply as a middle-aged man raised as a Catholic, I do not understand how another middle-aged man raised as a Catholic believes he has the right to tell women what they should and should not do when they find themselves pregnant with a child that they do not, with a potential child that they do not want. And remember, if you're going, oh, well, you know, it's a bit of one, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Jacob Rees Mogg, when pushed by the brilliant Suzanne Reid on Good Morning Britain, he said if a woman gets raped, she shouldn't be allowed to terminate the pregnancy. What's happened to our country that this is now a mainstream topic of conversation on breakfast television? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Should men ever publicly contribute to the the anti-abortion side of this debate? I, as someone who loves debating and loves arguing, I don't think we should. And when I was a 15-year-old schoolboy debater standing up, what an insufferable little prig I must have been. Luckily, reality intervened. It doesn't seem yet to have knocked at Jacob Rees Mogg's door. It's 12:18. And you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. This is. Do you know what this is coming up now? Before we start our conversation about Jacob Rees Mogg's desire to sort of, it's a bit Sharia, isn't it? Not letting women choose what happens to them when they get pregnant. It's odd that, because that other thing in the Mail today about educated women who choose to be housewives, if you stuck them in burqas, the Daily Mail would be up in arms. But they're white and or you know, non-Muslim and educated, so it's absolutely fine for a woman to want to stay at home and essentially be a doormat. But before we do that, this is an exercise in utter pointlessness coming up now. I'm going to provide you with yet another example of at best dishonesty, at worst incompetence, and possibly somewhere in between those two stools, hypocrisy. And depending on how you voted in the Brexit referendum, you will either sigh and go, well, what's it going to take? Or you will put your fingers in your ears, metaphorically, obviously, because it'd be weird to do it literally. You'll put your fingers in your ears and pretend that you've heard something different from what you've just heard, okay? This is absolutely scientific in its simplicity, this experiment. So here is the Brexit Secretary, David Davis, speaking in the House of Commons yesterday.
At the start of these negotiations, both sides agreed that the aim is to make progress on 4 key areas: citizens' rights, financial settlement, Northern Ireland and Ireland, and broader separation issues. We've been doing just that. And I've always said, Nobody's ever pretended this will be simple or easy. I've always said this negotiation will be tough, complex, and at times confrontational.
Tough, complex, and at times confrontational. Nobody ever said this process would be simple or easy. And here is the Secretary of State for Trade and arch-Brexiteer Liam Fox speaking on the radio last year.
And the workers of Europe and their economy. And if you think about it, you know, the free trade agreement that we will have to come to with the European Union should be one of the easiest in human history. We're already beginning with zero tariffs, and we're already beginning at the point of maximal regulatory equivalence, as it's called. In other words, our rules and our laws are exactly the same. And the only reason that we wouldn't come to a free and open agreement is because politics gets in the way of economics.
And again, there you go. So either, if you're like me and fond of evidence and facts, you're sitting here going, oh my God. And if you're not, if you are increasingly signed up to the unicorn school, or it's the Tinkerbell school of thought, which is if you believe in something enough, you can make it happen. Then you've just put your fingers in your ears and heard something completely different. Oh, Liam Fox was talking about the trade agreement, not the negotiation. You can't even start negotiating the trade. The negotiations that are underway at the moment, there's 3 platforms, the Irish border, the rights of citizens. You can't even begin talking about trade until you finish that. They're part of the same process. Nobody ever pretended it would be easy, says the Secretary of State for Brexit. It will be one of the easiest things to do in human history, says his cabinet colleague, a year apart. And that's Britain, in a nutshell. 25 minutes after 12 is the time. Why do some men feel entitled to tell women what they can do with a pregnancy? 0345 6060 is the number you need. Catherine's in Manchester. Catherine, what would you like to say?
I actually agree with you. I don't think men should be able to dictate. They can have an opinion, but at the end of the day, it's the woman's body. However, I don't think it's fair that a man would be financially liable for the child that he didn't want.
Oh boy, I think isn't this complicated enough without you chucking that into the middle of the room. So if a woman gets pregnant and the man doesn't want anything to do with the child, and the woman chooses to have it, then the man can't be held financially responsible for that child. Oddly, I think I disagree with you.
The thing is you have, under our current laws anyway, you have several different opportunities to decide whether or not to have the child.
You do.
And the man only has one option.
If you don't want to be financially responsible for a child, a potential child, don't have sex.
Oh, I agree with you on that respect, completely.
Well, and therefore if you have sex, then...
Well, accidents happen. I know several women who've had children when they've been on contraception or they've used a condom.
Yeah.
So nothing's 100%.
Oh, mate, this is already super tricky, and you've just chucked a complete new spanner into the machinery.
People like Jacob Rees Mogg say, well, abortion, you should never have any, when he isn't limited by the 2-child limit that his government brought into place.
You mean on benefit?
He doesn't have housing issues.
Child allowance. No, but I'd go further, actually. Jolyon Morn, who runs the Good Law Project, shared some astonishingly personal information on Twitter the other day about his origins. He didn't realise he was adopted until quite late in life, and it turned out his mother had a dalliance with an old Etonian, and he said, as was normal in those days, he just paid her off. And she had the baby, and her future partner ended up adopting him. So while I quite like the challenge that your contribution poses, it also, of course, speaks to wealth, because if you're a rich bloke, in the olden days, you could go around impregnating whoever you want and then just chucking them £5 a week to stay quiet.
But they still can do that. Child support is very, very low if you're on a low income.
Yes, of course it is.
So you still
no, I can't cope with it. I know. Sorry. No, stop.
The one who has to pay for them to live there.
It's too tricky already. I'm not open. I can't believe Caroline's put you through as if this wasn't a moral conundrum already tricky enough. I can't start unravelling the question of whether or not a man should pay for a baby that he didn't want his sexual partner to have in the first place.
It's just a counter argument to you saying, well, they shouldn't get to have a say.
Oh, God, it is, isn't it?
But they should have a say because they're the ones who got to be financially liable for 18 years.
No, you misunderstood one thing. I'm not saying that a man shouldn't have a part in the decision-making process about a potential baby that he's helped conceive. I'm saying Jacob Rees Mogg shouldn't have any right whatsoever to tell you whether or not you should be able to have an abortion. And if you happen to be a Catholic like he is, the idea that he can put it out there that you are somehow breaking the law and going to go to hell, which presumably is what he believes, that's what I find obnoxious.
Well, he's not the first Tory to say that.
No, well, I know he isn't.
And she wanted to change the abortion laws a couple of years ago. I think it began with an N.
Where does it come from, the desire to control this coercive contraception? Where does it come from?
Well, if you're a feminist, you would say that is misogyny.
Yeah.
If you're a religious person, you'd say it's God's will, because murder is...
yeah, but do you know these religious people are usually, especially in America, the evangelicals, are at the front of the queue when it comes to explaining why we shouldn't help refugees.
Well, that's exactly it. They're pro-birth, they're not pro-life.
Yeah. Well, they're pro-telling women what to do, actually, I would say. Wouldn't you?
If they were truly pro-life, they wouldn't have put on the 2-child limit. They'd be supporting wages. I mean, people think I'm a stay-at-home mother, and people think that we're rich because we can afford to do that, but we're not. We can't afford to run a car. We can't afford to go on on holidays, really. You know, it's only...
No, I hear you. Although I stand by my original fear that you were making an issue that's already very complicated even more complicated. I shouldn't criticise you for that. I do it for a living. Catherine, thank you. Jacob Rees Mogg, the latest sort of Gussie Fink Nottle, replacing Boris Johnson in the affections of the grassroots Tory support, come out against equal marriage and against abortion in any circumstances, even when you're raped, which puts him on the same page as an awful lot of imams at the lunatic fringe of Islam. I'd probably be the only person in the British media to make that connection. Just as far as I'm aware, I'm the only person in the British media to wonder whether the possibility that 5 serving soldiers are convicted of terrorism offences means we have to get rid of all soldiers, just in case, you know, because of the poison skittles argument. But Jacob Rees Mogg coming out with something which would fit very, very well in Pakistan, where if your daughter is raped, you are allowed to forgive the rapist. And if you forgive the rapist, then the daughter has no recourse to the law. Parents can do the forgiveness. I kid you not. Jacob Rees Mogg subscribes to a very similar school of thought. But people who think that they despise Pakistani moral hypocrisy will be cheering Jacob Rees Mogg to the rafters. And I would cautiously suggest that people who suddenly claim compassion and care for unborn lives are usually precisely the same people who rush and race to display callousness and cruelty to born lives who happen to be on a boat crossing the Mediterranean. Weird that, or not. One will explain to me why all these ships sail in the same armada. The notion that men should be able to tell women what they can and can't do when they're pregnant. The notion that ethnicity or geographical origin is somehow more important, more indicative of a person's value than their behaviour or the contents of their heart and soul. All of these things that go hand in hand. The idea that rich people need to be given lots and lots of help to get richer, but poor people need to be given a lot more stick than carrot in order to work hard. You want a poor person to work hard, give them less pay. You want a rich person to work hard, give him more pay. Why do all of these things go hand in hand? It's odd, isn't it? I don't even know if it's a right-left dichotomy anymore. It seems to me to be almost a division between people who look to evidence and people who look to faith. And, of course, faith plays a key part in conversations about abortion, because it's hard to imagine any man without having recourse to religious beliefs feeling that he should be allowed to tell his daughter, when she has ended up pregnant as a result of being raped, that she's not allowed, he doesn't believe she should be allowed to terminate the pregnancy. And why have we never discussed this issue on this programme before? Well, partly because it brings all the fruitcakes out of the woodwork, but to be honest with you, we quite enjoy that you know, I thought this battle was over, but what we've learned in the last 2 years, it didn't take swastikas to appear on the streets of Charlottesville and Donald Trump to offer up a condemnation of them that the Nazis actually were delighted by, did it? To really bring it home with a resounding thump that none of these battles are won, ever. None of these battles are ever won. They're only ever kept in abeyance. So now we're back to coercive contraception, something that when it happens in Pakistan, the same people who presumably are clapping Jacob Rees Mogg generally would be queuing up to condemn a culture that allows a society, a man, a law to tell a woman what she can and can't do when she gets pregnant. A couple of phone lines free, 0345 606 0973. Greg's in Sidcup. Greg, what made you pick up the phone?
Well, I know if my daughters were raped, I would encourage them not to have an abortion. I would do all I could, actually, to discourage it. In the end, I mean, they can do whatever they like. They're of age, and they would do whatever they like. But I would do all I could, not that they don't have an abortion.
So there's a point. There's a point at which. Hang on a second. I just want to be clear that I understand you. There's a point at which you are entitled to have your opinion. So I need to know what you mean by you would do all you could. Would you tell them they were going to hell?
No, I wouldn't, because I wouldn't know if they're going to hell or not. But I would.
So what would you do then? What's the furthest you'd go?
I would provide all the resources necessary. If we, my wife and myself, had to bring up the child, we'd be prepared to do that. We would put every possible opportunity so that it minimizes the impact on my daughter, so that she doesn't kill her unborn child. And I find it interesting, even from what you're saying, that you have no problem just allowing the guy who committed the rape to, let's say, just go through the judicial system, but you're very happy to kill that unborn child in the most horrific way possible.
Sorry, do you know, I was about to compliment you on being sensible, because it seems to me perfectly reasonable to say to your daughter, when she's battling with the aftermath of having been raped, that if you did decide that you wanted to have the child, then your mother and I would be more than happy to look after it. But now what you're actually doing is, if you don't do what I want, you'll be killing your unborn child in the most horrific way possible.
James, I didn't say that.
You did.
And no, I didn't say that.
You just did.
Okay, well, if you think I said that...
You said you'd be prepared to kill the child in the most horrific way possible.
No, I'm saying...
Okay, I misheard you then. My apologies. You definitely didn't say that.
I'm saying to you that you wouldn't give the same punishment to the child as you would give to the rapist.
Well, that's because there is no child until the child is born.
Excuse me? Then clearly you know nothing about science and nothing about about the development of a child.
Mate, I can't even hear you properly. I mean, it's hardly surprising I don't know anything about science. I'm sure you just said kill it in the most horrific way possible, but apparently you didn't. So yeah, I'm wholly unreliable.
Listen, why do you think there isn't a child there? What is it do you think that actually is there, Jim?
What do you think the word born means?
I know what the child born.
But tell me. Tell me. What does the word born mean? You'll remember that I said I didn't want to have an argument about whether abortion is right or wrong. I wanted to have an argument about... I wanted to have an examination of men who think they've got the right to tell women what they can and can't do with their own bodies. But that is clearly you. So now we know what you're made of. Tell me what the word born means.
The born, it simply means when the child transitions from from the womb to the outside world.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. You can give me a biological or an etymological definition of the word, but birth is the beginning of life.
No, that's ridiculous.
Unless you're being religious, but you were being scientific.
Certainly, I know...
No, Greg, with respect, you wanted to do this in a scientific way, not a religious way. So there are religions that teach life begins at conception, but science teaches us that life begins at birth. That's what birth means. So if you want to do it in a scientific way, we have to agree what birth and born means.
Right, I agree. We know that certainly all the information, the DNA, if you like, everything is present at conception. We know all that occurs is the development and growing of that child. When I say development, in terms of by the time the child reaches 12 weeks, it's fully developed. All it needs to do is grow. We know that, and if you've ever seen an abortion, and I have, and incidentally, just to let you know, I've actually housed in our house several girls who are pregnant, who, if we didn't, they may have well had to have an abortion, and so consequently, I know what abortion is about.
Good grief!
My key point.
What religion are you?
What's that got to do with it?
I think it's
what religion's got to do with this?
Really?
Yes.
Well, why won't you tell me what religion you are then?
Well, I am a Catholic.
Right.
As you're supposed to be, but I don't believe that you actually are
supposed to be. Ding, ding, ding. Carry on.
Well, the reason is because clearly you don't believe anything the Catholic Church believes.
I believe lots of things the Catholic Church believes, but I also believe that if there is a God, he would want me to exercise my moral and intellectual judgment in pursuit of a common good. And a common good is not served by you telling your daughter who's been raped that she's not allowed to have an abortion, and if she does, she'll be killing a baby in the most horrific way possible. And as someone who subscribes to pre-Vatican II Catholicism, you would be telling her that she'd burn for all eternity in the flames of hell, Greg.
James,
Happy Father's Day.
What planet... listen, James, what you're saying there is just junk. First of all, I've not said any of that. And second of all, James, you know, I don't know whether...
Peace be with you, Greg.
I cannot
Peace be with you, brother.
Sorry?
Peace be with you.
Yeah, I cannot tell if anybody is going to hell or not. But my point being...
But that's what the church teaches, Greg.
I would do all I could in terms of supporting her.
No, you didn't. That's what you started off saying when I thought you were going to be quite nice. But within a blink of an eye, you went on to killing the child in the most horrific way possible.
James,
that's not really being supportive to your daughter's freedom of choice.
I'm repeating to you, James, because I do know of the development of the child. You know, I know when the heart beats. I know when the child moves. I don't know if you've ever seen a child moving in the womb.
Everybody who is a parent has had their scans. Everybody has seen that potential life. And you are perfectly entitled to cling to your beliefs. It's when you tell your poor daughter who's just been raped that she's going to burn in the eternal fires of hell if she terminates her pregnancy that you, for me, sir, move into the realms of the profoundly un-Christian. But that's just my opinion. You don't have to set so much store by it.
James, what is it if it's not a child?
It's a fetus.
What does fetus mean?
Fetus means a collection of cells with the potential to become a child after birth.
It means little child.
After birth. After birth, it becomes a child. Call it an embryo. You can call it what you want. I don't mind, Greg. But, you know, if God forbid this horrible scenario that we've ended up discussing were to occur, ask your daughter what she wants before you tell her what you want, Greg. Will you promise me that?
James, honestly...
It's a simple question. Will you ask her what she wants before you tell her what you want?
Of course I would.
Good, and listen to her answer. Because that's really the greatest gift a dad can give to a child, is to listen to them when they tell you what they want. And they probably don't want to be described by their own dad as killing a baby in the most horrific way imaginable. But hey, it's your house. I don't know what passes for polite conversation. And speaking of polite conversation, PMQ's up next. It's weird that, isn't it? Because I'm not going to lie to you. I found the last caller pretty close to repellent. But Sheila Fogarty, who holds similar views, I don't, because Sheila's a woman. That was the angle I was intrigued on this. Jacob Rees Mogg makes comments about abortion. I just think, button it, pal. Seriously, it's got nothing to do with you. And the reason is because when I was 16, and I thought that my girlfriend at the time had become pregnant, we both did, my lifelong opposition to abortion disappeared in a moment, because the idea that I had any right whatsoever to tell her what to do next disappeared in the blink of an eye. Of course I don't. So it's a woman's right. But again, you know, I shall listen with interest to Sheila explaining why she should be able to tell a pregnant 16-year-old that she's doing something wrong when she elects to end her pregnancy. Before we turn to Theo Ushwood, one quick political overview for you. Again, this is part of my ongoing exercise in utter futility and pointlessness, because if you voted to leave the referendum, to leave the European Union, you will now hear something very, very different from the actual words coming out of your radio. If you voted to remain, or you are increasingly persuaded that you made a mistake when you voted to leave, you will hear the actual words. Here's a Daily Mail headline. Jean-Claude Juncker's top henchman has branded Brexit stupid and demanded that it is reversed in a sign of the increasing desperation of the European Commission, by David Maddox. And here are 3 lines from the interview referred to in that headline. The door of the European Union after March 2019 will always be open, and to all of our British friends, of course, that is something that we humanly wish. However, he said, politically at the moment this option is not on the table, and he noted that the only people who can reverse it would be the British people. He said, I am not a dreamer, I am a realist. Brexit will happen on March the 29th, 2019. Through the lens of British newspapers, Jean-Claude Juncker's top henchman has branded Brexit stupid and demanded that it is reversed in a sign of the increasing desperation of the European Commission. What did you hear? The words that I said? Or the words that you wanted to hear? Depends entirely on your relationship with reality.